Hey, I got your request to find out a little bit of the difference in between interest-based and distributive negotiations and a little bit of tactics for each one. And I thought I would make this video to describe it for you. Essentially, the difference in between distributive and interest-based negotiations is that with distributive, everything is part of a small piece of pie, or it's part of a pie, if that makes sense. So there's a limited amount of resource that you and your opponent are working against. Notice that I said opponent for the other person. You guys essentially don't really work together, you work against each other, right? More like a fight, not like a fight, but like definitely a conflict than anything. With the distributive negotiations, which is the one that's I just described, is the you want to give out the least amount of information as possible with the to your opponent, and you want to learn or retain as much information you can possible about them, right? Also, the goal in this type of negotiation is short term. So, distributed negotiations, you have short term relationship goals. You're not really focused on doing pleasantries or anything like that. It's essentially, I want this, and how can I get that from you, essentially. Um, Now, this sounds bad. There are a few situations where this is applicable. For example, if you were buying a used car or you were at like a flea market and trying to haggle or essentially like that, it's essentially haggling. You want to make sure while you're doing it that you're respectful with the positions that you offer, that you don't offer too high or too low as to offend the person, but that you essentially try and find a balance in between of what's too high and low to ask for, and then you work your way down from there, right? The second type of negotiation is interest-based negotiation. Essentially, this is where you and the other person in the sale work together to form a mutually beneficial deal, right? And there will always be one person who comes out a little bit more ahead of the other, but in this situation, both people they're going to come out better than they were before, right? There's a huge difference between this one and interest or the distributive based. Since distributive based is almost combative or aggressive and interest based, everybody is very vocal about what they know, what they have, and what they want, and they try and help each other to achieve that in their own way, if that makes sense. They try and help each other to reach a mutually beneficial goal. You want in interest-based negotiations, you want to give away as much information as you can as to help the other person to understand where you're coming from and what your expectations are and what you want. In both of these situations, the interest-based and distributive negotiations, preparation is key. If you don't prepare, then you're going to fail and get taken advantage of. You need to prepare as much as possible, knowing as much as you can about the other person, whether it's interest-based and it's somebody you're collaborating with, or it's distributive negotiations where it's a combatant or an opponent. With some of the strategies for interest-based negotiations, essentially, yeah, just communicate as much as possible with that person and try and see how you can help them and they can help you, and then make that vocal, right? You definitely want to get the better end of the deal. And you do that by as well just finding a balance, finding an offer that's not too high, not too low, and that will help you both. And then striving for that, right? So I hope you now understand a little bit more about the interest-based and distributive types of negotiation and a little bit of the tactics that you can use while doing these different kinds. It's also important to note that with the interest-based negotiations, you're going to want to use that on your higher corporate, basically, yeah, your higher level deals, anything where you want a long-term relationship, because that's the goal of the interest-based negotiations, is to form a long-term positive relationship with whatever person that you're dealing with or negotiating with. So hopefully that helps. Take that into mind, explain that to your boss. And it's all about finding that balance in between the high and the low and making sure with the interest-based that you can form a long-term good relationship with them. And then with the distributive negotiations that it's short-term, that don't really have to put a lot of emotion to it. You just get what you need to get and then get out. So yeah. Hopefully this helps. Again, make sure you reach out with any questions. And if also, I'm sure if you look it up, it'll interest-based negotiations and distributive negotiations, that'll help a lot too. But cool. Thank you so much. Talk to you later.